The bar outside Camp Pendleton pulsed with Friday night energy. Young warriors who'd spent the week breaking themselves against the anvil of SEAL training finally had permission to be human again. Music throbbed, glasses clinked, voices rose in waves of laughter and war stories. The air carried scents of beer-grilled meat and Pacific salt from 3 miles west. In a corner booth, 5 figures huddled close. SEAL candidates, though statistics said most wouldn't survive the next phase. Bud's attrition hovered around 75%. Only the hardest, the most stubborn, the ones who refused to quit when their bodies begged for mercy, would earn the trident. Sergeant Alara Thorne sat among them. At 23, she defied expectations. No bulging muscles, no aggressive posture, just average height, dark blonde hair in a simple ponytail, civilian clothes that belonged on any college student jeans, gray sweater, worn boots. She nursed a Coke, ice mostly melted, listening more than speaking. But trained eyes would see truth. Her gaze never stopped moving, cataloging exits and threats. Her movements carried economy, nothing wasted, everything controlled. Calluses marked her hands from rope climbs and rifle grips. She sat with her back to the wall, positioned to see at both entrances. Alara Thorne had graduated top of Bud's Class 374, 847 days of Earth's most punishing military training, fluent in 4 languages, Arabic, Pashto, Russian, Farsi, 2 classified Middle East missions under her belt operations, so sensitive even her unit's existence was compartmentalized above top secret. Her father had been a SEAL. Master Chief William Thorne killed in Ramadi 2006 when an IED shredded his Humvee. Alara was 11. She remembered the officers at the door, the folded flag they had given her mother, how the world suddenly felt made of glass that could shatter any moment. She'd joined to finish what he started, to honor his sacrifice, to prove a warrior's daughter could become a warrior herself. Tonight, though, she focused on one thing: the man who just walked through the door. Garrett Wolfe. She recognized him from the photos. 6'1", 200 pounds of muscle gone soft around the middle. Dirty blonde hair, blue eyes, a jaw that looked broken and reset at least once. Jeans, tight black t-shirt displaying tattooed arms, leather jacket despite warm September air. Alara's fingers tightened on her glass. Nothing else moved. That was survival's first lesson in hostile territory: never let them see you react. Garrett Wolfe was 35, former Marine Force Recon Elite tip of the spear, but dishonorably discharged in 2019. Official record said inappropriate conduct with a fellow service member. Unofficial record, the one Alara read 3 days ago, told a darker story: assault, sexual harassment. A pattern the Marine Corps handled quietly before it became a PR nightmare. They'd pushed him out with a bad discharge, hoping he'd disappear. Instead, he became a defense contractor. Triple Canopy Defense Solutions hired him at $180,000 yearly for security consulting at military installations. The kind of job that kept predators near prey, wrapped in contract legitimacy and corporate lawyers. For 6 months, Garrett Wolfe worked at Camp Pendleton. For 6 months, complaints piled up. 11 of them. 11 women, all active duty, all saying the same things: harassment, unwanted touching, threats, intimidation. Every complaint had been buried. Alara watched Garrett swagger toward the bar, contractor buddies flanking him like an entourage. Loud, already drunk, the kind of men who took up more space than needed because they could, because no one had ever made them stop. She thought about Natalie Vaughn. Private First Class 19, bright-eyed and determined. Natalie had filed a complaint 6 months ago. She'd done everything right. Documented incidents reported through proper channels, even recorded audio on her phone. No one believed her. Or maybe they had, but it didn't matter. Garrett Wolfe had friends. The kind who made paperwork disappear. The kind who valued contracts over the safety of a teenage girl serving her country. 3 weeks after filing her complaint, Natalie Vaughn swallowed a bottle of sleeping pills and never woke. She'd left a note for her father. Just 4 words in shaky handwriting: "I'm sorry, Dad, nobody believed me." Her father was Master Chief Declan Vaughn, 62 years old, a SEAL legend. The kind of man who'd served in Desert Storm, trained 3 generations of warriors, earned more commendations than most people earned paychecks. A man who'd lost his wife to cancer 2 years ago and his only daughter to a system that failed to protect her. Declan Vaughn sat at a back table right now. Alara had seen him when she arrived, though they hadn't acknowledged each other. Civilian clothes, looking like any retired military man nursing a quiet Friday beer. Steel gray hair cut high and tight. Weathered face with deep eye lines. Hands that looked capable of crushing stone. He was watching Garrett Wolfe too. This wasn't coincidence. Alara in that corner booth, visible. Declan positioned where he could see everything. Three other men scattered throughout nursing beers and pretending to watch football on overhead screens. This was an operation. Garrett Wolf had just entered the kill zone. Ilara breathed slowly, centering herself. Her training instructor's voice echoed in memory. Control your breathing, control your heart rate, control your mind. Warriors who stay calm live. Warriors who panic die. She'd learned that lesson in places most people couldn't find on maps. Afghan villages where every shadow might hide enemies. Iraqi desert highways where wrong turns meant ambushes. Syrian safe houses where walls were thin and danger constant. She'd learned patience. To wait. To let enemies make the first move while she stayed 3 steps ahead, calculating angles and probabilities and outcomes. Garrett and his crew ordered shots. Getting louder now, voices carrying across the bar. Ilara caught conversation fragments. Crude jokes, contract bragging complaints about military bureaucracy. The usual talk of men who'd never quite accepted their glory days were behind them. One tablemate, a young candidate named Torres, leaned closer. "You okay, Thorne? You look tense." Ilara gave a small smile. "Just tired, long week." "Tell me about it. I thought Hell Week was supposed to be the hardest part. Turns out everything is Hell Week." Others laughed, trading stories about instructors who took personal joy in making them suffer, about night dives when water felt like knives, about cardboard tasting meals they devoured, because their bodies burned 5,000 calories daily. Ilara listened and nodded appropriately, but most attention stayed on Garrett Wolf, counting his drinks, observing body language, waiting. SEALs trained in situational awareness, the ability to observe and process multiple information streams while appearing relaxed. The same skill that lets snipers spot targets at 1,500 meters or CQB specialists clear rooms in under 3 seconds. Ilara could tell you 47 people currently occupied this bar. She knew 2 exit locations plus 1 emergency fire door. She'd clocked security cameras, 1 above the bar, 1 near the entrance, 1 covering back pool tables. She knew which patrons were military, civilian, or contractors like Garrett. She also knew with absolute certainty that Garrett Wolf had noticed her table. His eyes had swept past twice, lingering fractionally too long on the women. Torres kept talking. "My sister asked why I wanted to be a SEAL. She couldn't understand voluntary suffering. I tried explaining, but there's no explanation," Ilara said quietly. "Not one that makes sense to people who haven't done it." "Exactly, it's like a calling." Something like that. What Ilara didn't say, for her, it was more than calling. It was debt. Every time she pushed to the limit, refused to quit, when her body begged mercy, she was repaying her father's sacrifice, proving his death hadn't been meaningless, that the values he died defending, honor, courage, commitment, still meant something. The bar's energy shifted. Ilara felt it before seeing it, that subtle atmospheric change preceding violence or confrontation. Garrett Wolf stood, moving toward their table, friends grinning, egging him on. Pack mentality turning cowards into predators. Ilara's heart rate didn't increase. Elite training taught bodies to stay calm in situations, sending normal people into fight-or-flight panic. She'd been shot at. She'd cleared buildings full of enemy combatants. She'd performed emergency first aid on wounded teammates while explosions rocked the ground beneath her. A drunk contractor in a California bar wouldn't make her panic, but she'd let him make his move. Master Chief Vaughn needed witnesses. They all did. The 11 women whose complaints were ignored needed someone to finally see what they'd been trying to report for months. Garrett stopped at their table. Up close, he smelled like whiskey and cologne. Bloodshot eyes, dilated pupils. Very drunk. Good. Drunk men made mistakes. "Oh, well," he said, voice carrying that particular false friendliness predators use. "Looks like baby seals trying to play grown-up." Torres stiffened, but Ilara put a hand on his arm. "Silent message, let me handle this." "Can we help you?" Her voice stayed level, polite, giving no escalation excuse. "Not yet." Garrett's eyes locked on her. "You can start by telling me why a pretty thing like you wastes time with these losers. Come have a real drink with a real warrior." The implication was clear. The insult deliberate, testing her, seeing how she'd react. Ilara met his gaze without flinching. "I'm good, thanks. We were having a private conversation." "Oh, a private conversation." Garrett leaned closer, hands on their table. "See, bars are public spaces, which means I can talk to whoever I want. Right now, I want to talk to you." One buddy laughed. "Come on, sweetie. Don't be rude. Man's just being friendly." Ilara's mind worked through scenarios. Garrett was 6'1", probably 210. Drunk meant slower reflexes but less inhibited. Former Force Recon so trained in hand-to-hand but out of practice. She could see it at the softness around his middle, how he stood weight too far forward, balance compromised by alcohol. If she wanted, she could break his wrist in approximately 2.3 seconds. Hook his thumb, rotate at the joint, apply pressure at the precise angle, fracturing small bones before his brain registered pain. Follow with a solar plexus strike, driving out air, finish with a knee to the face as he doubled over. Clean, efficient, over before anyone reacted. That's what training taught. But that wasn't tonight's mission. Tonight she needed him to be the aggressor, to cross the line so clearly that no lawyer, no friend in high places, no corporate shield could protect him. So instead, she said quietly, "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested. Please leave us alone." Firm but not aggressive, setting a boundary clearly verbally before witnesses. Any reasonable person would have backed off, mumbled an apology, and walked away. Garrett Wolf was not reasonable. His face twisted. The friendliness mask dropped, revealing anger underneath. "You think you're too good for me because you survived some training course. I asked you politely to leave us alone," Alara said. "I'm asking one more time. Or what, gonna cry to your instructors? File a complaint? Getting louder now, attracting attention. Let me tell you something, sweetheart. I've been doing this since before you were out of diapers. You want to play soldier, fine, but don't act like you're anything more than..." He reached out, fast. His hand grabbed her wrist, fingers closing tight, yanking her halfway from the booth. A little girl pretending to be tough. The bar erupted. Torres and others jumped up, ready to intervene. But Alara raised her free hand in a subtle gesture, freezing them in place. Her expression hadn't changed. She looked at Garrett with the same calm, but something in her eyes made him hesitate fractionally. The look of someone calculating angles and outcomes. Someone trained for violence who knew exactly how this could end. Someone choosing moment by moment not to unleash her capabilities. "Let go of my wrist," Alara said quietly, voice steady, almost conversational. "Right now." Garrett laughed. The sound was ugly, meant to humiliate. He tightened his grip. Alara felt skin compress. That would bruise. Good, more evidence. "Or what, you gonna make me boot camp, baby?" Another voice cut through the bar noise. It carried authority like a blade carries edge, sharp, undeniable, stopping conversations mid-sentence. "Or she's going to break your arm in 3 places before you realize what's happening." 4 men stood from scattered tables, not large or obviously intimidating at first glance. But something about how they moved made every person with military experience take notice. They walked toward Garrett with relaxed confidence of men who'd never needed to prove themselves because their presence spoke volumes. These weren't gym warriors or weekend hobbyists. These were operators, real ones. The kind whose stories ended up in classified files and whose actions shaped history in ways the public never knew. The speaker stepped forward, early 60s steel gray hair, weathered face that had seen sun and wind in battle. Master Chief Declan Vaughn. Even in civilian clothes, something unmistakably military emanated from him, the bearing, how he held himself, absolute certainty in his eyes. "Son B," Declan said, voice carrying 4 decades of command. "Wait, you have about 5 seconds to let go of that recruit before you learn a very painful lesson about who you're dealing with." Garrett's grip loosened slightly. His alcohol-fogged brain tried processing what was happening. These weren't random patrons. These were problems. The other 3 formed a loose semicircle, not threatening, not aggressive, but positioned, cutting off Garrett's escape routes. Subtle tactical movement happening instinctively after years of training. Commander Silas Barrett was 58, lean and wiry, with eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. He'd spent the last decade running cyber warfare operations from Fort Meade, the kind of man who could bring down governments with a laptop. Commander Garrison Cole was 56, built like a fire hydrant, short, thick, immovable. He'd trained CQB for Special Operations Forces, teaching warriors how to clear rooms and neutralize threats in the space between heartbeats. Commander Thaddeus Quinn was 54, youngest, but no less formidable. A JAG officer, Judge Advocate General, meaning he knew military law like surgeons knew anatomy. Every regulation, every loophole, every power lever within the system. Together, they represented over 200 years of naval special warfare experience. And they were all staring at Garrett Wolf like a firing squad viewing a condemned man. Garrett's buddies went quiet. The whole bar went quiet. That particular silence falling when violence hangs in air like smoke. "Who the hell are you?" Garrett demanded, trying to sound tough but not quite managing it. His hand remained on Alara's wrist grip, considerably loosened. Declan smiled, not a friendly expression. "I'm Master Chief Declan Vaughn, These are Commanders Barrett, Cole, and Quinn. We're all Navy SEAL commanders. And the recruit you're currently assaulting, he paused, letting the moment stretch. She could kill you with her bare hands before you took your next breath. Now let her go. Words landed like hammer blows. Every veteran in that bar straightened. Navy SEAL commanders, 4 of them. Here. Now. Garrett's face cycled through expressions: confusion, disbelief, fear. His grip released completely. Alara calmly sat back, rubbing her wrist where red marks were already forming. She'd never worried about Garrett. She knew exactly how to handle him. But she'd been taught that sometimes the best fight is the one you don't have. Declan continued, voice cold and precise. Sergeant Alara Thorne graduated top of Bud's Class 374. 847 days of training. Fluent in 4 languages: Arabic, Pashto, Russian, Farsi. Completed 2 classified deployments I can't discuss publicly. Trained in multiple combat forms, including Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and close quarters battle tactics that would hospitalize you before your brain caught up to what was happening. Commander Barrett stepped forward, voice quiet but caring. That woman you just grabbed, she's shown more courage and earned more respect in 3 years than you will in your entire life. Garrett stumbled backward. I didn't know. She didn't look like... Like what? Commander Cole cut him off. Like a warrior, that's your first mistake. Underestimating people based on appearances. That's what gets men killed in the field. Commander Quinn pulled out his phone, turning the screen toward Garrett. We've been watching you, Wolf. We know who you are. We know you've been harassing female personnel for months. The screen showed a document, an official-looking file with Garrett's photo at the top and long text below. 11 complaints, Quinn continued. 11 women who reported your behavior. Somehow nothing ever happened. Because you have friends in the right places. Friends who value contracts over integrity. Friends who decided protecting a predator was more important than protecting people who serve this country. Garrett's face had gone pale. The swagger vanished, replaced by something resembling panic. I don't know what you're talking about. Those complaints were investigated. I was cleared. No, Declan said, voice colder than before. Those complaints were buried. There's a difference, but that ends tonight. He stepped closer to Garrett. Even at 62, Declan Vaughn was not a man you wanted to face. He moved with the efficiency of someone who'd spent a lifetime learning how to hurt people in the most effective ways possible. You know what your biggest mistake was, Wolf, not the harassment, not even the assault. Your biggest mistake was touching someone under my protection. Someone who reminds me every day of why I wore this uniform for 40 years. Something in Declan's voice made Alara look up. For just a moment, their eyes met across the bar, and in that look she understood. This wasn't just about her. This wasn't even just about the 11 women who'd filed complaints. This was about Natalie, the daughter Declan lost, the girl who tried to do everything right and was let down by every system supposed to protect her. This was about making sure it never happened again. Garrett tried speaking. Look, man, I don't want trouble. I was just being friendly. Friendly, Barrett's voice was sharp. Is that what you call it? Let me show you something friendly. He tapped his phone screen. Suddenly, sound filled the bar. Video. The picture was shaky, filmed from a body-worn camera. The timestamp showed 3 months ago. The scene showed a woman in military fatigues walking across a parking lot. The camera followed her. Got closer. The angle was wrong, too low, too focused on certain body parts. This wasn't security footage. This was someone stalking prey. Then the camera caught up. A man's voice, Garrett's voice, saying things making everyone in the bar go silent. Crude propositions. Threats disguised as compliments. The woman trying to walk faster, clearly uncomfortable. That's Corporal Bryn Calloway, Barrett said, stopping the video. She filed a complaint 4 months ago. Dismissed because there was no evidence. Except there was evidence. You just made sure it never saw daylight. He swiped to another video. Different woman, same predatory behavior. Then another, and another. 47 videos, Barrett said, filmed over 6 months, all recovered from the body camera you're wearing right now. The one you thought was turned off. It wasn't. Garrett's hand moved instinctively to his jacket. There, partially hidden under his collar, was a small camera lens. Standard contractor equipment meant to document work for legal and security purposes. What Garrett didn't know, while he'd been drinking, Commander Barrett had been sitting 30 feet away with a laptop hidden under his jacket. Barrett had spent 20 years in cyber warfare. Hacking a commercial body camera with Bluetooth enabled was child's play. He'd cloned the entire drive Every video, every file, every piece of evidence Garrett had been collecting for his twisted purposes. You were recording them, Cole said, building a library. Why blackmail entertainment? Or were you just so arrogant you thought you'd never get caught? Garrett was shaking now. You can't use that. That's illegal search and seizure. You didn't have a warrant. Quinn smiled, not kindly. Actually, we did. NCIS Naval Criminal Investigative Service has been running an operation for 3 weeks. We brought them evidence. They opened a formal investigation. A judge issued a warrant for electronic surveillance. Everything we've collected is completely admissible in court. Every video, every audio file, every piece of data showing your pattern of behavior. Implications sank in. Garrett looked around, seeing faces staring back. Disgust, anger, contempt. This is insane, he said, voice weak. You can't do this. I have rights. I have a lawyer. You'll need one, Declan said, because Monday morning you'll receive notification that your triple canopy contract is terminated. You're banned from every military installation in the United States. Every defense contractor in this country will receive a detailed report about your behavior. Your career is over, Wolf. Tonight. Right now. Garrett tried once more. You can't prove anything. Those videos could be doctored. My word against 11 women, Cole interrupted. 11 separate complaints, all describing the same pattern, all corroborated by video evidence, all documented in official NCIS files. He pulled out his own phone, showing another document. We don't need to prove anything. The evidence proves itself. And unlike people who protected you before, we're not interested in making this disappear. We're interested in making sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. The bar's security guard appeared at the door, alerted by commotion. Former Marine, recognizable by his forearm tattoo. When he saw the 4 SEAL commanders, he straightened instinctively. These gentlemen needed an escort out, he asked Declan. Just him, Declan said, pointing to Garrett. Mr. Wolf was just leaving, permanently. The guard nodded, stepping forward. Not aggressive, but making resistance clearly futile. Let's go, sir. Time to leave. Garrett's friends had already backed away, distancing themselves. When ships sink, rats jump first. They wanted no part of coming consequences. As Garrett was escorted toward the door, he turned back once. His eyes found Alara. Hatred there now, and something else. Something resembling fear. This isn't over, he said. Not loud, not quite a threat, but a promise. Alara met his gaze. Her expression hadn't changed since he first grabbed her wrist. Calm, controlled, absolutely certain of herself. Yes, she said quietly, it is. Then Garrett Wolf was gone, pushed into the night by the security guard, leaving behind nothing but silence and cheap cologne smell. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly normal bar sounds returned. Conversations resumed. Music started. Life continued as it always does after crises pass. Declan walked to Alara's table. Up close, she could see face lines, the weight he carried. This man had lost his daughter, failed to protect her when she needed him most. That failure had broken something inside that probably would never fully heal. You okay, Sergeant? He asked. Alara nodded. Yes, Master Chief. Thank you for the backup. You had it handled? Not a question. He knew she had, but he also knew sometimes the battle isn't about whether you can win alone. Sometimes it's about showing you're not alone. That people will stand with you, fight for you, make sure predators can't hide in shadows. The other 3 commanders gathered around. Barrett was already typing on his phone, sending files and reports to Washington contacts. Cole talked quietly with the bar owner, ensuring tonight's security footage was preserved. Quinn drafted legal documents ensuring Garrett Wolf never worked in defense contracting again. There's something you should know, Declan said to Alara, voice lower now, meant just for her. This wasn't random. I asked you to be here tonight specifically. I knew Wolf came to this bar every Friday. I knew he couldn't resist approaching young female service members. I needed him to make his move in public with witnesses where we could document everything. Alara processed this. I was bait. You were a warrior doing her duty, Declan's voice was firm, and you did it perfectly. Because of tonight, 11 women are getting justice. Maybe more. Maybe we've started something that'll finally make the system work the way it's supposed to. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small object. A flash drive, dark blue, worn at edges. My daughter left this behind, he said, before she died. It contains audio recordings. 6 months of her documenting every interaction with Garrett Wolf. Every inappropriate comment, every threat, every time he made her feel unsafe. His hand shook slightly, holding it out to Alara. She called you, didn't she, the night before she took those pills? Alara's throat tightened. This was the part she'd been dreading. The part keeping her awake at night staring at barracks ceilings, replaying that conversation over and over. Yes, she whispered. I was in Afghanistan, on a mission. I couldn't get back in time. Natalie had been part of the mentor program experienced service members paired with new recruits to help navigate military life. Alara volunteered because she remembered how hard her first year had been, how isolated she'd felt, how much she'd needed someone who understood. She and Natalie had talked maybe a dozen times, mostly about training, dealing with difficult instructors, challenges of being a woman in male-dominated fields. Normal stuff, friendly stuff. Then came that last call, 3 a.m. California time. Ilara had been in a Kandahar safe house preparing for an operation at dawn. Her phone buzzed a secure line only a handful of people accessed. Natalie's voice had been small, scared. I don't know what to do anymore. I filed the complaint like you said. I did everything right, but they're not going to do anything. His friends are too powerful. Now he knows I reported him, he's getting worse, and I can't keep doing this. Alara had tried. God, she'd tried. Talked to Natalie for 45 minutes, telling her to hold on that help was coming. They'd figure this out together. She'd promised to call again as soon as the mission was over. But the mission went sideways. Enemy contact. A running firefight lasting 16 hours. By the time Alara got back to base and could check her phone, there were 17 missed calls from a California number. The 18th call had been from Master Chief Vaughn telling her his daughter was dead. She trusted you, Declan said, now no accusation in his voice. Just sadness. That means something. It means she knew you were someone who cared. Someone who tried. I should have done more, Alara said. Words came out rough. I should have. You were halfway around the world fighting a war. Declan's voice was gentle but firm. You couldn't have saved her, but you can help me make sure this never happens to anyone else. He pressed the flash drive into her hand. Use this. When the time comes when we need that final evidence piece, I want you to be the one to present it. Because Natalie would have wanted that. She believed in you. She believed in what you represent, the idea that things can change, that the system can work if we make it work. Alara closed fingers around the flash drive. It was warm from Declan's pocket, small enough to hide in her palm. Inside was a dead girl's voice speaking truth no one had wanted to hear. I won't let her down, Alara said. I promise. Declan nodded. For just a moment, composure cracked. Grief showed through raw and sharp. Then he pulled it back, locked it down the way military men learn, save tears for later. Right now, there's work. None of this ends tonight, he said. Wolf has connections, people who benefit from keeping him around. They'll fight back, try to discredit evidence, attack women who came forward, paint this as a witch hunt. It's going to get ugly. Let it get ugly, Barrett said, finishing his phone calls. We've got 40 years of service between us. Contacts in Congress, the Pentagon, every major news organization. If they want to fight, we'll give them one they won't forget. Cole grinned. I've been waiting for a good fight. Training recruits is rewarding, but there's something satisfying about taking down actual bad guys. Quinn was more serious. We need to be smart, document everything, follow every regulation to the letter. Don't give them any excuse to claim we violated procedure. The four commanders looked at each other. Something passed between them, understanding, agreement, the kind of silent communication coming from decades of working together in the most dangerous situations imaginable. They'd made a decision. Not just to take down Garrett Wolf, but to take down the entire system that protected him. To shine light into dark corners where predators hid, protected by bureaucracy and old boy networks, and the misguided belief that some careers were more valuable than others' safety. This was going to be war. Not the kind fought with rifles and explosives, but the kind fought with evidence and testimony and the slow grinding machinery of justice. The kind where victory meant changing hearts and minds, where casualties were measured in destroyed reputations and ended careers. And they were going to win. Because they had something Garrett Wolf and his protectors didn't have. They had truth. And they had warriors willing to fight for it. Alara stood from the booth. Her teammates looked at her with new eyes now. They'd known she was good. You didn't graduate top of your class without being exceptional. But knowing it intellectually and seeing it demonstrated were different things. She'd sat there calm as glass while a man twice her size grabbed her. Let him make his move, controlled the situation, set him up for the fall. That took a different kind of courage than facing bullets. That took courage to be vulnerable, to trust in the plan to let others fight your battle when you could have fought it yourself. Drinks are on me, Torres said finally. I think we all need one after that. Others agreed, but Alara shook her head. I'm good. I think I'll head back to base. She needed to be alone, process what just happened. Hold that flash drive, and think about the girl who recorded it, hoping someday someone would listen. Declan walked her to the door. Outside, the California night was cool and clear, stars visible here away from worse city lights. Alara had grown up in Colorado where the night sky felt close enough to touch. She'd missed that during desert deployments where stars were beautiful but foreign. This is just the beginning, Declan said. You know that, right? Taking down Wolf is step one, but there are others like him. Systems that protect them. We've got work to do. I know, Alara said, and I'm ready. He studied her face. You remind me of her, Natalie. Not just because you're both young, both determined, but because you have that same quality, that refusal to accept things can't change. That belief that if you fight hard enough, if you're brave enough, you can make the world better. Is that naive? Alara asked. Maybe, but it's also necessary. Because the moment we stop believing things can change, we might as well quit. And I didn't spend 40 years in this uniform just to quit now. He held out his hand. Not a salute, they were in civilian clothes, regulations didn't require it. Just a handshake. Warrior to warrior, equal to equal. Alara took his hand. His grip was strong, callous, the handshake of a man who'd spent his life doing hard physical work. In that moment, she felt the weight of what they were taking on. The enormity, the risk. But she also felt something else. Hope. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, they could actually win this fight. Get some rest, Declan said. Monday's going to be interesting. Alara nodded and turned toward the parking lot where she'd left her car. As she walked away, she could feel the flash drive in her pocket, solid and real. Evidence. Truth. The voice of a girl who tried to do the right thing and was failed by everyone who should have protected her. But she wouldn't be failed anymore. Alara would make sure of that. Behind her inside the bar, life returned to normal. Music played, people laughed. The confrontation was already becoming a story that would be told and retold, details shifting with each telling. But for people who'd been there, who'd seen it happen, something had changed. They'd witnessed justice swift and undeniable. They'd seen what happened when warriors chose to protect their own, when good men decided enough was enough. And in a world that often seemed to reward the wrong people, where power protected power and victims were told to stay silent, that was something worth witnessing. Alara drove back to Camp Pendleton with windows down, letting cool night air clear her head. Tomorrow, everything would start. The investigation would begin. Evidence would be processed. The machine of military justice would start turning slow, but inexorable. But tonight, she let herself have this moment, this small victory, this first step on a longer journey. She thought about her father, wondered what he'd say if he could see her now. Probably something about duty and honor and never backing down from a fight. That's who he'd been. That's who she was trying to be. The gate guard at Camp Pendleton checked her ID and waved her through. As she drove toward her barracks, she passed training grounds where she'd spent the last year pushing herself to the absolute limit of human endurance. Where she'd learned pain was temporary, but quitting lasted forever. Where she'd discovered she was capable of far more than she'd ever imagined. All that training, all that preparation had been for moments like tonight. For standing firm when it would be easier to back down. For trusting in the mission even when fear whispered she should run. For being the person others could count on when everything went to hell. She parked and sat for a moment in silence. The base was quiet at this hour, most people already asleep or out enjoying Friday nights elsewhere. Through her window, she could see San Diego lights in the distance, a sprawling glow against darkness. Somewhere out there, 11 women who'd filed complaints against Garrett Wolf were going about their lives. Some probably thought nothing would ever come of those reports, that they'd spoken up and been ignored, and that was just how it was. By Monday, they'd know different. They'd know someone had listened. Someone had cared enough to fight. Their voices had mattered after all. Alara got out and headed to her barracks. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, she'd done her part. She'd been the bait that drew out the predator. She'd stayed calm when violence beckoned. She'd trusted in the plan and let justice take its course. And somewhere she hoped Natalie Vaughn could rest a little easier, knowing her death hadn't been in vain. That something good had come from something terrible. That her voice recorded on a small blue flash drive was about to be heard in a way that would change everything. The door to the barracks closed behind Alara with a soft click. Inside, her fellow SEALs were sleeping, dreaming whatever dreams warriors have. Tomorrow they'd train again, push themselves again, test their limits again. But tonight, one battle had been won, and sometimes that was enough. Monday morning arrived with California's signature clear, sharp sunlight. Pacific wind carried salt and heat's promise. At Camp Pendleton, the base was already alive. Marines running in formation, helicopters practicing maneuvers, the constant rhythm of military life continuing as always. But in a small conference room in Building 1043, something different was happening. Something that would send ripples through the entire defense contracting community before day's end. Garrett Wolfe sat in a hard plastic chair, his expensive lawyer beside him. Theodore Brennan wore suits costing more than most people's monthly rent and had a reputation for getting contractors out of tight situations. He looked supremely confident. Garrett did not. He looked like a man who'd spent the weekend realizing his life was about to implode. Across the table sat three people. A representative from Triple Canopy Defense Solutions, stone-faced and silent. A Navy JAG officer, not Commander Quinn, but one of his colleagues, Captain Reeves, who had a reputation for being absolutely merciless. An NCIS Special Agent Ryan Mitchell, who'd been investigating defense contractor misconduct for 15 years and had seen every trick, every excuse, every desperate play guilty men made when walls closed in. "Let's be clear why we're here," Agent Mitchell said. His voice was flat professional, carrying zero emotion. "Mr. Wolfe, your contract with Triple Canopy Defense Solutions is terminated effective immediately. You're banned from all Department of Defense installations. And you're currently under investigation for multiple criminal violations, including sexual harassment, unlawful surveillance, and attempted extortion." Brennan leaned forward. "My client denies all allegations. The so-called evidence was obtained through illegal means. Any halfway competent judge will throw it out." Captain Reeves didn't smile, but something in her eyes suggested she'd been waiting for exactly this argument. "The evidence was obtained pursuant to a valid warrant issued by a federal magistrate judge after we presented probable cause. Commander Barrett accessed Mr. Wolfe's body camera using methods approved by NCIS Technical Operations Division. Everything was done by the book." "We'll see what a court says," Brennan shot back. "We certainly will," Reeves agreed. "In the meantime, Mr. Wolfe's access to military installations is revoked. His security clearance is suspended pending investigation. And Triple Canopy has been advised that continued employment of Mr. Wolfe will result in review of their entire contract portfolio." The Triple Canopy representative spoke for the first time. "Mr. Wolfe's employment is terminated. Effective this morning, we're cooperating fully with the investigation." Just like that. 48 hours ago, Garrett had been untouchable, protected by contracts and connections and willful blindness of people who didn't want to see what was happening. Now those same people were cutting him loose, distancing themselves as fast as possible. Garrett's face had gone red. "This is bullshit. You can't do this to me. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Mitchell interrupted. "I'd strongly suggest you exercise it, because every word you say right now is being recorded and can be used against you. And Mr. Brennan here, he's charging you about $500 an hour to sit in this room. You want to waste that money yelling at us? Go ahead. But it won't change the facts." The facts. 47 videos. 11 victims willing to testify. A paper trail of complaints that had been buried but not destroyed. And 4 Navy SEAL commanders who'd made it their personal mission to ensure this case didn't disappear like all the others. Brennan whispered something to Garrett, who went quiet but looked like he wanted to flip the table. The lawyer turned back. "What are you offering?" "Offering?" Reeves looked genuinely surprised. "We're not offering anything. This isn't a negotiation. Mr. Wolfe committed crimes. He's going to be charged. The only question is whether he wants to cooperate with our investigation into who helped him bury those complaints, or whether he wants to face maximum penalties alone." That got Garrett's attention. For the first time, real fear showed in his eyes, because he knew exactly who'd helped him, and those people had power. The kind that could make his life very difficult if he started talking, but the kind that was also crumbling bit by bit as the investigation expanded. "My client needs time to consider options," Brennan said. "Fine, you have until Friday," Agent Mitchell said. "After that, we're moving forward with charges regardless. And every day you wait is another day we're digging deeper into who else was involved in this cover-up." The meeting ended. Garrett was escorted out by security no longer welcome in the building where he'd worked for 6 months. His badge was confiscated. His equipment was seized. In one weekend span, he'd gone from well-paid contractor to unemployed suspect facing federal charges. Outside the building, leaning against a wall in morning sun, Declan Vaughn watched Garrett leave. The older man didn't move, didn't call out, just observed, making sure Garrett saw him, making sure Garrett understood this wasn't over, that every step of his prosecution would be watched by people who cared about the outcome. Garrett met Declan's eyes for just a moment. Then he looked away and hurried to his car, Brennan following behind, still talking about legal strategies and appeals and reasonable doubt. Declan pulled out his phone and sent a single text to a group chat. Phase 1 complete. 3 responses came back immediately. Barrett, Phase 2 already in motion. Cole, ready when you are. Quinn, the dominoes are falling. This was just the beginning. Garrett Wolfe was the visible target, the one everyone could see and point to. But he wasn't the real problem. The real problem was the system that protected him. The people who'd received those 11 complaints and decided they weren't worth investigating. The officers who'd valued contracts and relationships over the safety of people they were supposed to protect. Those people were about to have a very bad week. Commander Silas Barrett sat in his home office, 3 monitors glowing in dim light. To anyone watching, he looked like a man checking email, maybe doing online shopping. In reality, he was conducting digital warfare with surgical precision. Barrett had spent 2 decades in naval intelligence, specializing in cyber operations. He tracked terrorist networks through the dark web, disrupted enemy communications, helped take down criminal enterprises that thought they were untraceable. This was almost too easy by comparison. The body camera footage had been just the start. Once you had one thread, you could follow it to find others. Garrett's camera had been syncing to a cloud storage account company, provided supposedly secure. Barrett had accessed that account with a warrant and found a treasure trove. Emails, text messages, financial records. All backed up automatically because Garrett, like most criminals, wasn't nearly as smart as he thought he was. The emails were particularly interesting. They showed a pattern. Every time a complaint was filed, Garrett would send a message to a specific address. Just a heads up, nothing explicit. And within 48 hours, that complaint would be closed. No investigation, no follow-up, just gone. The email address belonged to a civilian contractor in the base legal office. Kenneth Voss, who'd been processing legal documents and managing complaint files for 8 years. Long enough to know how the system worked. Long enough to know how to make things disappear. But Kenneth Voss wasn't acting alone. The trail led higher. Barrett found financial transfers. Small amounts carefully disguised as consulting fees or expense reimbursements. Money flowing from Triple Canopy Defense Solutions to 3 different accounts. One belonged to Voss. The other 2 belonged to military officers. Lieutenant Commander Raymond Hicks, Major Patricia Donnelly, both in positions to influence how complaints were processed, both receiving regular payments having nothing to do with their official duties. And above them, coordinating everything, was the man who really ran the show. The one who'd been protecting Garrett Wolfe because Garrett was useful. Because Garrett provided information about other contractors, about bidding processes, about the kind of intelligence that could give Triple Canopy an edge worth millions in government contracts. His name was Colonel Lawrence Crane, 53 years old with a distinguished record, including Iraq and Afghanistan tours. He ran the contracting office for the entire Southwest region, overseeing billions in defense spending. He was also corrupt, thoroughly systematically corrupt, and he'd been at it for at least 5 years. Barrett compiled the evidence into a comprehensive report. Bank records, email chains, meeting logs, testimony from whistleblowers who'd noticed irregularities but been too afraid to speak up. It was damning, undeniable. He encrypted the file and sent it to 3 places simultaneously: NCIS headquarters in Quantico, the Department of Defense Inspector General's office in Washington, and the office of Senator Patricia Morrison, who chaired the Armed Services Committee and had made military accountability her signature issue. Then he made a phone call. "It's done," he said when Declan answered. "By tomorrow morning, 3 senior officers will be in federal custody. By week's end, Triple Canopy will lose every government contract. By month's end, we'll see congressional hearings." "How bad is it?" Declan asked. "Bad. $340 million in contracts awarded through fraudulent processes. Dozens of legitimate complaints buried. Evidence of bid rigging, bribery, obstruction of justice. This isn't just about Garrett Wolfe anymore. This is about systematic corruption at a level that's going to shock people." Declan was quiet for a moment. "Good. People should be shocked. They should be angry. Because this is what happens when we let the wrong people have power. When we value money and connections over integrity." Barrett understood what Declan wasn't saying, that this was bigger than justice for Natalie. This was about preventing the next Natalie, and the one after that. This was about burning down a system that had failed so many people for so long. "How's Sergeant Thorne handling all this?" Barrett asked. "She's solid, focused. I think she understands what we're building here. She's going to be at the center before this is over. The media will love the story young female SEAL standing up to corruption. She ready for that kind of attention?" "She's a SEAL," Declan said simply. "She can handle anything." Tuesday morning, the story broke. Not in mainstream media that would come later, but in the military community. Someone, probably Agent Mitchell or one of his NCIS colleagues, leaked enough details to get the conversation started. Within hours, it was everywhere. Online forums where veterans gathered, Facebook groups for military spouses, Twitter threads dissecting what this meant for military culture, Reddit discussions going hundreds of comments deep. And then the victims started coming forward publicly. Corporal Bryn Calloway was first. She posted a video on Instagram, her face calm, but her words carrying weight. "My name is Bryn Calloway. I'm a Marine. 2 years ago, I filed a complaint against a civilian contractor named Garrett Wolf who sexually harassed me. That complaint was buried. I was told there wasn't enough evidence. I was encouraged to drop it and move on. I almost left the military because I couldn't stand the idea that my safety mattered less than a contract. Today, I found out my complaint was one of 11 deliberately suppressed by senior officers being paid to look the other way. And I want you to know this is not okay. This can never be okay." The video went viral. Within 24 hours, it had 2 million views. Other women started sharing their own stories. Not just about Garrett Wolf, but about the culture that had enabled him. About being told to toughen up, to not make waves, to understand this was just how things were. Sergeant Paige Sullivan posted a detailed Twitter thread describing how she'd been passed over for promotion after filing a complaint. How her career stalled, while the man who harassed her continued working on base, protected and untouchable. Private First Class Delaney Winters did an interview with a military news website explaining how she'd requested a transfer to another unit because she felt unsafe. How she'd been made to feel like she was the problem, like she was weak for not being able to handle it. The hashtag Justice for Natalie started trending, not just among military members, but broadly. People wanted to know how this happened, how a system designed to protect service members had failed so catastrophically. And at the center of it all, though, she didn't seek attention, was the ghost of Private Natalie Vaughn, 19 years old, dead by her own hand because she tried to do the right thing and been failed by everyone who should have protected her. Alara watched it unfold from her barracks, her phone buzzing constantly with news alerts and messages. Other SEALs in her unit wanted to know if rumors were true, if she'd really been the one who'd confronted Garrett Wolf at that bar, if she was really working with the commanders on this investigation. She didn't confirm or deny anything. She just kept training, kept running, kept pushing herself through the physical and mental challenges that were daily reality of SEAL life. But she also checked her phone obsessively, read every story, watched every video. These were the women whose complaints had been buried, who'd been told to stay silent, to not make trouble, to accept this was just how things were. Now they were making noise, and people were finally listening. Wednesday afternoon, Alara received a text from an unknown number. When she opened it, she found a message from Corporal Calloway. "I heard you were there, that you helped make this happen. Thank you. You'll never know how much this means." Alara stared at the message for a longer time before responding. "You did the hard part. You spoke up when it was dangerous. That took real courage." "So did you," came the reply. "Want to meet for coffee sometime? I think we have things to talk about." Alara agreed because this was what it was about ultimately. Not punishment for the guilty, though that mattered, but connection between people who'd been harmed, building something together and making sure the next generation didn't have to fight the same battles. Thursday morning, the arrest happened. Lieutenant Commander Raymond Hicks was taken into custody at his San Diego home. Major Patricia Donnelly was arrested at her office on base. And Colonel Lawrence Crane, who tried to get ahead of the story by requesting early retirement, was detained at the airport attempting to board a flight to Mexico. The charges were extensive: conspiracy to obstruct justice, bribery, fraud, violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Each charge carried serious prison time. Together, they represented a potential life sentence. The news hit the military community like a bomb. A colonel, a lieutenant commander, a major. Senior officers with years of service arrested for corruption. It shattered the illusion this was just about one bad contractor. This was systemic. This was organizational failure at a profound level. And still, the story kept growing. NCIS announced they were expanding their investigation to other bases, other contractors. The Department of Defense Inspector General launched a comprehensive review of how harassment complaints were processed across all service branches. Senator Morrison scheduled hearings for the following month. The machine of accountability, once it started moving, was unstoppable. Friday afternoon, Theodore Brennan called Agent Mitchell with an offer. Garrett Wolfe was ready to cooperate. Fully. Completely. He would testify against everyone involved in exchange for a reduced sentence. The meeting happened in a secure room at NCIS headquarters. Garrett sat across from Mitchell Reeves and a federal prosecutor brought in to handle the case. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. The swagger was gone, entirely replaced by desperate energy of a man trying to save himself from a disaster of his own making. "Tell us about Colonel Crane," the prosecutor said. No preamble, no small talk. Garrett swallowed hard. "I met him about 18 months ago at a contracting conference in Las Vegas. We got talking about how the bidding process worked, and he made clear he was open to arrangements, information sharing." "What kind of information?" "Competitor bids, internal assessments, anything giving triple canopy an advantage. In exchange, he wanted a percentage. Not direct payments, too obvious, but consulting fees paid to shell companies he controlled." "And the complaints?" Reeves asked. "How did that arrangement start?" Garrett looked down at his hands. This was the part that would seal his reputation forever, making him a cautionary tale told in military ethics classes. "The first woman who complained about me, Corporal Calloway, she filed through official channels. It landed on Crane's desk. He called me, told me about it, suggested that if I had information about Lockheed Martin's upcoming bid on a cybersecurity contract, the complaint might go away." "And you provided that information?" "Yes." "How did you obtain it?" "One of their junior project managers liked drinking at the same bar I did. I bought him shots, got him talking. He didn't think he was giving away anything sensitive, just complaining about his boss. But the details were there if you knew what to listen for." The prosecutor made notes. "And this became a pattern." "Yes, every time someone complained, Crane would call. I'd provide information. The complaint would disappear. He said it was better this way, kept things clean, avoided messy investigations that could damage reputations and slow down important contracts." "Did you believe that?" Mitchell asked. "Or did you just not care?" Garrett finally looked up, meeting the agent's eyes. "I didn't care. I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew those women deserved better. But I liked my job. I liked the money. I liked feeling important. And it was easy to tell myself they were overreacting, that they needed to toughen up, that this was just how things worked in the real world." The honesty was almost worse than defiance would have been, because it revealed the banality of his evil. He wasn't a monster. He was just a selfish man who'd chosen his comfort over other people's safety again and again. "Tell us about Private Vaughn," Reeves said quietly. Garrett's face tightened. "That one was different. She didn't just file a complaint. She had evidence. Audio recordings of our conversations. Timestamps. Witnesses. She'd built a case that was going to be hard to dismiss." "What happened?" Crane panicked, said this was too big, too documented. But he had a plan. He involved Hicks and Donnelly. They were his people, would do what he asked. They buried the evidence, claimed recordings were inadmissible, pressured Vaughn to drop it. When she wouldn't, they started rumors about her, that she was unstable, had a history of making false accusations, classic discreditation. "And you?" the prosecutor asked. "What did you do?" "I made it worse," Garrett said, voice cracking. "I confronted her one night after she left base. Told her if she kept pushing this, I'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person she really was. That I had friends who could ruin her career, her reputation, everything. I wanted to scare her into backing off. Instead, you pushed her to suicide." Garrett nodded. He was crying now, which didn't make what he'd done any better, but at least suggested he understood the magnitude. I didn't mean, I never wanted anyone to die." "But someone did," Mitchell said flatly. "A 19-year-old girl who trusted the system would protect her, who did everything right, who tried to be brave and speak up. And you, along with 3 senior officers and God knows how many others who looked the other way, you killed her just as surely as if you'd handed her those pills yourself." The room was silent after that, just Garrett's quiet sobbing and the scratch of the prosecutor's pen documenting everything. Finally, Brennan spoke. "My client has provided valuable testimony. We expect this cooperation to be reflected in sentencing recommendations." The prosecutor didn't look up from her notes. "Mr. Wolfe will receive some consideration for cooperation. But let's be clear, he's still facing significant prison time. The best he can hope for is 20 years instead of 30. That's the reality. Garrett wiped his face. 20 years. He'd be 55 when he got out, his life essentially over. But at least he'd be alive. Unlike Natalie Vaughn. The interview continued for 3 more hours. Names, dates, specific instances of bribery and obstruction, bank account numbers, email addresses. Everything needed to build airtight cases against everyone involved. By the time it was over, the sun was setting outside. Mitchell gathered his files and prepared to leave. At the door, he paused and looked back at Garrett. One more thing. Master Chief Vaughn, Natalie's father, he's been the driving force behind this investigation. He's the reason we didn't let this go, didn't let it get buried like all the others. You should know that. Garrett looked stricken. I want to apologize to him, to tell him, there's nothing you can say, Mitchell interrupted. No apology that matters, no words that'll bring his daughter back. The only thing you can do is tell the truth and accept the consequences. That's the only form of honor left to you. That evening, Declan, Barrett, Cole, and Quinn met at a small restaurant off base. A place they'd been coming to for years, where the owner knew them well enough to give them a quiet corner table where they could talk without being overheard. They'd won. The arrests had been made. Evidence was documented. Prosecution was moving forward. Everything they'd worked for over the past 3 weeks was coming together. But none of them looked happy, because winning didn't change what had been lost, didn't bring back Natalie or erase the trauma of the 11 women who'd been ignored and harmed. Wolf is cooperating, Quinn reported. Full confession, he'll testify against everyone. The cases are solid. Crane tried to make a deal, Barrett added, offered to turn over financial records on other corrupt officers if we'd reduce charges. The prosecutor told him to go to hell. Cole took a drink of his beer. I've been getting calls from reporters. They want interview statements, the whole thing. I've been telling them to wait until after the trial. Oh, good, Declan said. This isn't about publicity, it's about justice. The others nodded. They'd all been approached news outlets wanting the dramatic story of 4 Navy SEAL commanders taking on military corruption. But they'd agreed to stay quiet until the legal process played out. The last thing they needed was for some defense attorney to claim pretrial publicity had prejudiced the cases. What about Sergeant Thorne? Cole asked. She's been staying out of the spotlight, but people are starting to figure out she was involved. Some of the women have been talking about her online, calling her a hero. Declan smiled slightly. She's not comfortable with that label. She just did her job. She did more than that, Barrett said. She put herself in danger. Let Wolf make his move knowing it could have gone bad. That takes a special kind of courage. She's her father's daughter, Declan said quietly. William Thorne was one of the best operators I ever served with. Elara has that same quality, that absolute determination to do what's right no matter the cost. They ordered food and talked about other things for a while. Families, retirement plans, young SEALs coming up who showed promise. The normal concerns of men who'd spent their lives in service and were starting to think about what came next. But eventually conversation came back to the case. It always did, because this wasn't finished. The arrests were just the beginning. There would be trials, appeals, attempts to discredit witnesses and claim the investigation had been biased. And there was still Garrett Wolf himself, cooperating, yes, confessing, yes, but also still free on bail, still out in the world, still capable of causing problems. I don't trust him, Cole said. Men like that, they don't change. They just get better at hiding in what they are. He's scared, Quinn countered, facing real consequences for the first time in his life. People like that either break completely or they lash out. Which do you think Wolf will do? Barrett asked. Quinn considered. Both. He'll cooperate because he's scared, but he'll also resent everyone who put him in this position. That resentment will fester, might turn into something dangerous. Declan had been quiet, but now he spoke. We need to be careful. Wolf knows he's going to prison. He knows his life is over. Desperate men do desperate things. You think he'd try something? I think he's the kind of man who blames everyone but himself. And when people like that feel cornered, they bite. The others understood what Declan wasn't saying directly. That Wolf might try to hurt someone, might try to salvage some sense of control by lashing out at people he blamed for his downfall. Should we warn Sergeant Thorne? Cole asked. I already have, grown, Declan said. She's aware. She's being careful. But even as he said it, he felt a knot of worry in his chest. Because he'd told Natalie to be careful too. had given her the same advice about documenting everything, about not being alone in vulnerable situations, about trusting her training and instincts. And Natalie had done all that, had been careful, had been smart, and it hadn't been enough. The system had failed her. That failure cost her life. Declan had promised himself, standing over his daughter's grave, that he'd make sure it never happened again, that he'd change the system or die trying. He was keeping that promise. The arrest proved it. The investigation proved it. The fact that 11 women were finally getting justice proved it. But the work wasn't done. And until Garrett Wolfe was behind bars, until every person who'd enabled him was held accountable, until the culture that allowed this to happen was dismantled and rebuilt, Declan wouldn't rest. None of them would. Because that's what warriors did. They protected. They fought. They stood between the innocent and those who would do them harm. And this time, they weren't going to let anyone slip through the cracks. This time, the system was going to work the way it was supposed to. This time, justice would be served, even if they had to drag it kicking and screaming across the finish line. The dinner ended. The four commanders paid their bill and headed back to their respective homes. The night was clear and cool stars visible despite light pollution from San Diego's glow on the horizon. Somewhere out there, Garrett Wolfe was sitting in whatever temporary housing his lawyer had arranged, contemplating a future of prison cells and hostile inmates who didn't take kindly to men who hurt women. He was probably drinking, probably raging, probably scheming about how to minimize his sentence or discredit his accusers or find some way out of the trap he'd built for himself. And somewhere else, Alora Thorne was probably running or training or studying, doing what she did every day, pushing herself to be better, stronger, more capable, preparing for whatever came next, because something was coming. They all felt it. That sense coming from years of combat experience, that intuition telling you when the enemy's about to make a move. The storm wasn't over. It was just gathering strength. And when it broke, they'd need to be ready. All of them, together, standing firm against whatever Garrett Wolfe in his desperation brought their way. The hunt had become a siege, and sieges, Declan knew from hard experience, often ended in blood. He just hoped when the end came, the right people would be left standing. 6 weeks had passed since that Friday night at the bar. 6 weeks of legal proceedings, media attention, and the slow grinding machinery of military justice doing its work. The story had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Congressional hearings were scheduled. The Secretary of Defense issued a statement promising reforms. Triple Canopy Defense Solutions had lost every government contract and filed for bankruptcy protection. But for Alora Thorne, life continued with SEAL training's relentless rhythm. She ran, she swam, she practiced close quarters combat until her muscles burned and her mind went quiet. The physical exhaustion was a blessing, really. It kept her from thinking too much about what was coming. The trial was set to begin in 3 weeks. She'd be called to testify, so would the 11 other women. The whole ugly story would be laid out in open court, and the world would watch. She was ready for that. Or at least she thought she was. What she wasn't ready for was the call that came on a Tuesday evening in late October. Alora was in her barracks reviewing mission reports from her last training exercise when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Sergeant Thorne? The voice was male, nervous, young. Speaking. This is Officer Ryan Mitchell with San Diego Police. I'm calling because we just responded to a suspicious person report near your registered address. A male subject was observed in a vehicle across from your building for approximately 2 hours. When we approached, he fled. We recovered the vehicle. It's registered to a Garrett Wolfe. Alora's blood went cold. Wolfe was there watching my building. Yes, ma'am, we've issued a warrant for his arrest on stalking charges. This violates his bail terms. But right now, we don't know where he is. I need to ask you to be extremely careful. Is there somewhere else you can stay tonight? Alora looked around her barracks room. Single bed desk, footlocker, the sparse quarters of a warrior who traveled light. I'm on a military base. I should be safe here. Ma'am, with respect, this individual is former military. He knows how bases work. He knows security protocols. Please consider staying with friends or in a more secure location until we locate him. After the call ended, Alora sat very still thinking. Her training kicked in automatically. Threat assessment, risk analysis, tactical planning. Garrett Wolfe had been watching her building. That meant he knew where she lived, knew her routine, was planning something. The question was what and when. She picked up the phone again and called Master Chief Vaughn. He answered on the second ring. Alora, what's wrong? She explained about the police call, about Wolfe watching her building, about the warrant for his arrest. Declan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was tight with controlled anger. He's escalating. Brennan probably told him that, cooperation or not, he's looking at serious prison time. He's got nothing left to lose. What do you think he'll do? I think he blames you. You were the one he assaulted in public. You're the one whose testimony will be most damaging at trial. He probably thinks if he can intimidate you, get you to back down, maybe he can still salvage something. I'm not backing down. I know you're not, but Wolf doesn't understand that. He still thinks women can be scared into silence. It's worked for him before. Alara felt cold fury building in her chest. Let him come. I'll be ready. That's what worries me, Declan said. You're thinking like a warrior. You should be thinking like someone whose life is in danger. Wolf is desperate, which makes him unpredictable. He's also trained, which makes him competent. That will be a bad combination. So what do you suggest? Come stay at my place tonight. I've got a guest room. We can figure out next steps in the morning. Alara considered. Part of her bristled at the idea of letting Wolf's intimidation tactics change her behavior. But the smarter part, the part that had kept her alive through 2 combat deployments, knew Declan was right. Unpredictable threats required careful management. Okay, she said. I'll be there in 30 minutes. She packed a small bag, change of clothes, toiletries, her service weapon. SEALs were authorized to carry firearms on base, and she'd never been more grateful for that policy than right now. The Sig Sauer P2226 was loaded and holstered at her hip as she walked to her car. The base was quiet at this hour. Most people were either off duty and gone for the evening or already settled in their quarters. Security lights cast long shadows across the parking lot. Alara moved with purpose, keys in hand, alert to every sound and movement. She was halfway to her car when she heard it. The scrape of a boot on pavement. Behind her. Close. Alara spun hand, moving instinctively toward her weapon. A figure stepped out from between 2 vehicles. Male, 6 feet tall, wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap pulled low. Garrett Wolf. Easy, he said, raising his hands in a gesture that might have been placating if his eyes hadn't been full of rage. Just want to talk. Alara's hand stayed on her weapon. You're violating your bail conditions. The police are looking for you. You need to turn yourself in. I need to make you understand something. Garrett took a step closer. Alara could smell alcohol on him even from 6 feet away. This whole thing, it's gotten out of control. I made some mistakes, sure, but what you people are doing, it's ruining my life. You're taking everything from me. You took everything from yourself, Alara said. Her voice stayed steady, professional. Inside her mind was calculating angles, distances, threat levels. You assaulted women. You harassed them. You helped to cover up crimes. Those were your choices. Those women were oversensitive, making mountains out of molehills. This is the military, for Christ's sake. When I went through training, we didn't cry about hurt feelings. You didn't go through SEAL training, Alara said. You washed out of force recon before you even got to the hard part. And those women you dismissed, several have more combat deployments than you do. So don't talk to me about being oversensitive. Garrett's face twisted. You think you're so much better than me. You and those old men playing hero, but you don't know what it's like out here for guys like me. We do the real work. We take the real risks. And we don't get medals and parades. We get contracts that can disappear overnight because some girl decides she doesn't like how we looked at her. Is that what you think this is about? Alara felt anger rising but kept it contained. You really don't understand what you did wrong. After everything, after all the evidence, after 11 women told their stories, you still think you're the victim. I think I'm being railroaded by people who want a scapegoat. And I think if you don't back off, if you don't reconsider your testimony, you're going to regret it. There it was, the threat, spoken aloud in a dark parking lot where there were no witnesses, no cameras that Alara could see, just 2 people and the potential for violence. That's a threat, Alara said clearly. I'm a federal witness. Threatening me is a felony. Prove it, Garrett said. It's just you and me here. And who are they going to believe, the drunk contractor with nothing to lose or the perfect little SEAL who's got everyone fooled? He took another step forward. Alara's hand tightened on her weapon. She didn't draw it yet, didn't want to escalate unless she had no choice. But she was ready. Last chance, Wolf. Walk away, turn yourself in. Don't make this worse than it already is. Worse, Garrett laughed, and the sound was ugly. How could it possibly be worse? I'm going to prison. My career is over. My reputation is destroyed. I've got nothing left. Nothing except making sure you understand there are consequences for what you did. He reached into his jacket. Alara saw the movement and her training took over. Weapon drawn, aim, center mass stance solid. Don't move. Show me your hands, Garrett froze. His hand was inside his jacket, gripping something. For a long, tense moment, neither moved. Alara could hear her own heartbeat steady and calm despite the adrenaline. She'd been in situations like this before, had pointed weapons at people who might or might not be threats, had learned to read body language and intent in the split second before violence erupted. Take your hand out slowly, she said. Whatever you're holding, leave it in your jacket. Garrett's face showed something calculation maybe. Fear definitely, but also resignation. The look of a man who'd already made his decision and was committed to seeing it through. You don't understand, he said. I can't go to prison. I won't survive it. You know what they do to guys like me? Guys who hurt women? I'm dead the moment I walk through those gates. Then you should have thought about that before you became a guy who hurts women, Alara said. Now take your hand out of your jacket. Slowly. Instead, Garrett pulled, fast. His hand came out holding a Glock 19, not aimed at Alara, not yet, but rising, moving toward target acquisition. Alara didn't think, didn't hesitate, didn't second guess. She did what every SEAL is trained to do when facing lethal force. She acted. Her first shot took him in the shoulder. The 9mm round spun him sideways, disrupted his aim. His shot went wild, cracking into pavement, 6 feet to Alara's left. Before he could recover, before he could bring the weapon back on target, she fired again. Center mass, textbook. Garrett went down hard. His weapon clattered across the asphalt. Alara moved forward, kicked it away, then dropped to one knee beside him. He was still breathing, but the chest wound was bad. Arterial blood bright red pumping out with each heartbeat. Why? Alara asked, already pulling out her phone to call for help. Why would you do this? Garrett coughed. Blood flecked his lips. Told you. Can't go to prison. Better this way. Quick, clean. This isn't clean, Alara said. She applied pressure to the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. Her hands were steady movements, automatic. Combat first aid. She'd done this before for teammates hit in firefights. Never thought she'd be doing it for someone who'd just tried to kill her. Suicide by cop, Garrett whispered. Except you're not a cop. You're a warrior. Knew you wouldn't miss. Understanding hit Alara like a physical blow. This had been planned. Garrett hadn't come here to intimidate her or hurt her. He'd come here to die. Had chosen this method, this person, this moment. Had decided that if his life was over anyway, he'd take control of how it ended. And he'd made Alara the instrument of it. Security vehicles were approaching now, alerted by gunshots, flashing lights, shouting voices. Medical personnel with equipment. They took over, pushing Alara back, working on Garrett with efficient desperation of people trying to save a life that might already be lost. Alara stood there, weapon at her side, blood on her hands, and watched them work. Her mind was strangely quiet. No panic, no second guessing, just cold certainty that she'd done what needed to be done. That given the same situation again, she'd make the same choice. But underneath that certainty was something else. A recognition that Garrett Wolfe had won something in that final moment. He'd forced her to be the one to end it, had made her carry that weight for the rest of her life. Declan arrived 7 minutes later, moving faster than a man his age should be able to. He took in the scene, Alara standing alone, blood on her clothes, security personnel, swarming ambulance preparing to transport. His face went very still. Are you hurt? He asked, checking her over with experienced eyes. No, it's not my blood. What happened? Alara told him. Short factual sentences. Garrett appeared, made threats, drew a weapon. She fired. 2 shots, both on target. Self-defense. Declan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he pulled her into a fierce hug. You did exactly right. You hear me, exactly right. This is not on you. But it was in a way. Alara understood that. Would carry it the way soldiers carry all the necessary killings. Not with guilt exactly, but with weight. With the knowledge that taking a life even in justified circumstances changes something inside you. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing. Base security and NCIS agents were already processing the scene, photographing evidence, collecting statements. Alara would be questioned extensively. There'd be an investigation. But she wasn't worried about that. The facts were clear. The threat was real. The shooting was righteous. What worried her was the look in Garrett's eyes at the end. That mixture of hatred and satisfaction. That sense he'd accomplished something even in dying. The shooting investigation took 2 weeks. NCIS interviewed everyone, examined the evidence, reviewed Alara's service record and training documentation, consulted use of force experts, and ultimately concluded what everyone who understood tactical situations already knew. Sergeant Alara Thorne had acted appropriately when faced with an armed subject who posed an imminent lethal threat. The shooting was ruled justified, no charges would be filed, case closed. Except cases like this are never really closed. Garrett Wolfe survived his wounds. The shoulder shot had been relatively minor. The chest shot collapsed a lung and nicked his subclavian artery, but trauma surgeons at Naval Medical Center San Diego managed to save his life. He'd spend months recovering, would never fully regain use of his right arm, and would go to trial in a wheelchair. But he'd live, long enough to stand trial, long enough to be convicted on multiple counts, long enough to be sentenced to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole, and long enough perhaps to understand his attempt to control his own ending had failed, that he hadn't escaped consequences, that justice delayed but not denied had finally caught up to him. The trial happened in January. It lasted 3 weeks and dominated news coverage. 11 women testified. Their stories were heartbreaking and enraging. The evidence was overwhelming. Video footage, audio recordings, financial documents showing bribery and cover-ups. Testimony from Garrett himself, who'd fulfilled his plea agreement even after the shooting. Colonel Crane, Lieutenant Commander Hicks, and Major Donnelly were tried separately. All three were convicted. Crane received 18 years. Hicks got 12. Donnelly got 10. Their careers were destroyed, reputations ruined, pensions forfeited. The military justice system, so often criticized for protecting its own, had actually worked. Slowly and perfectly, but it had worked. Alara testified on the second day of Garrett's trial. She wore her dress uniform, every ribbon earned and displayed. She answered questions clearly, factually, without emotion. Yes, Garrett had assaulted her. Yes, she could have defended herself, but chose not to escalate. Yes, she'd cooperated with the investigation. Yes, she stood by every word of her previous statements. The defense attorney tried to shake her, suggested she'd been part of a conspiracy to frame his client, implied her training made her a danger, that perhaps she'd been the aggressor that night in the bar. Asked why she'd shot a man who'd supposedly only been defending himself in the parking lot, Alara answered each question with the same calm precision. No, because he drew a weapon, because I was in fear for my life, because I'm trained to respond to lethal force with lethal force, because that's what warriors do. We protect ourselves and others from those who mean us harm. When she stepped down from the witness stand, she walked past the defense table. Garrett was there, still in his wheelchair, still recovering. Their eyes met for just a moment. Alara saw no remorse in his gaze, no understanding of what he'd done wrong, just bitter resentment that he'd been caught and punished. Some people, she realized, never learn, never change. They go through life taking what they want and hurting who they must, and when consequences finally arrive, they're shocked and outraged that rules apply to them too. Outside, the courthouse media were waiting. Cameras, reporters, questions shouted from all directions. Alara ignored them all, head down, walking toward the car where Declan waited. But one voice cut through the noise. Sergeant Thorne, what do you want people to know about what happened? Alara stopped, turned, found the reporter, a woman about her own age, considered the question, thought about Natalie Vaughn and the 11 women and everyone else who'd been harmed by systems that valued convenience over justice. I want people to know that speaking up matters, Alara said, that reporting matters, that even when it feels like no one is listening, even when the system fails you, the truth still matters. Because eventually, if enough people refuse to stay silent, change happens, justice happens. It might take longer than it should. It might require more courage than anyone should have to show, but it happens. Do you consider yourself a hero? No, I consider myself someone who did her job. The real heroes are the women who filed complaints knowing they might be ignored, who spoke up anyway, who chose courage over comfort. They're the ones who deserve recognition. One more question shouted from the back. What about Private Vaughn? What would you say to her if she were here? Alara's throat tightened. I'd tell her we got him, that we got all of them, that her voice mattered, that she mattered, and that I'm sorry, so sorry, that we failed her when she needed us most. But that because of her courage, because of what she documented and reported, we were able to protect others. Her death wasn't meaningless. It was the spark that started everything. She turned away, then done with questions, and got into Declan's car. As they drove away from the courthouse, she watched the city slide past. San Diego, where she'd trained, and struggled and been forged into something stronger than she'd known she could be. Where she'd learned being a warrior wasn't just about physical capability, but about choosing to stand up when others might stay silent. September 29. Camp Pendleton blazed under California sun heat shimmering off tarmac, where 200 young women stood at attention. They wore Buddhist candidates' desert camouflage, their faces showing exhaustion and determination coming from weeks of Earth's most punishing training. Lieutenant Commander Alara Thorne stood on the reviewing stand, now 28 years old and hardened by 5 more years of service. She commanded SEAL Team 18, the first fully integrated unit in naval special warfare history. Her chest carried rows of ribbons, combat deployments, commendations, the Bronze Star she'd earned in Syria for actions still classified. But today wasn't about her. Today was about these candidates, women who'd chosen to push themselves beyond normal human limits, who'd survived Hell Week and dive phase in land warfare, who'd earned the right to stand here and be recognized for their achievement. Beside Alara stood Master Chief Declan Vaughn, now 67 and officially retired. But retirement for men like Declan didn't mean disappearing. It meant teaching, mentoring, passing along 4 decades of wisdom to the next generation. He taught a course called Legacy and Leadership at the Naval Special Warfare Center, sharing stories from Desert Storm in Somalia and all the other battles that had shaped him. Also present on the reviewing stand were 3 other familiar faces. Commander Silas Barrett, fully retired now and consulting for NCIS Cyber Division. Commander Garrison Cole, running a private tactical training academy for female operators. Commander Thaddeus Quinn, teaching military law at Georgetown University. The 4 commanders, Declan, Barrett, Cole, and Quinn, stood together one last time watching the women they'd helped protect, now protecting others. Today they were all here for a different reason. The ceremony began, speeches about courage and commitment and the proud tradition of naval special warfare. Alara only half listened. She'd given these speeches herself, knew the words by heart. Instead, she was thinking about how much had changed in 5 years. After the trial, after the convictions, after media attention finally died down, the real work had begun. Reforming how harassment complaints were processed, creating independent investigation channels that couldn't be corrupted by chain of command, implementing mandatory training on what constituted harassment and assault, building accountability into the system at every level. It had been slow, frustrating, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But it had happened. The culture was changing. Not everywhere, not fast enough, but changing. And part of that change was standing right here. 200 women who would never have been allowed to attempt SEAL training a generation ago, who were proving courage and capability had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with heart. The ceremony reached its culmination. The commander of Naval Special Warfare Command stepped forward to present the top graduate award. The name was announced, Petty Officer 2nd Class Delaney Winters. Alara smiled. Delaney had been one of Garrett Wolf's victims, one of the women who'd filed a complaint and been ignored, who'd requested a transfer because she felt unsafe, who'd been made to feel weak and inadequate. Now she was a SEAL, top of her class, proving what hadn't broken her had made her stronger. Delaney accepted her award with the same quiet dignity she'd shown throughout the trial 5 years ago. No showboating, no celebration, just a nod of acknowledgement and a return to formation. That was the SEAL way. The work was its own reward. After the ceremony, as candidates dispersed to celebrate with families and friends, Alara, Declan, and the 3 other commanders walked toward a building at the base edge. It was new, constructed over the past 3 years, with funding from private donations and government appropriations. The sign above the entrance read, Private Natalie Vaughn Memorial Training Center. Inside was a comprehensive support facility for service members dealing with harassment, assault, or discrimination, lawyers specializing in military justice, psychologists understanding military culture, victim advocates who could navigate the system, resources for reporting, for documenting, for pursuing justice without sacrificing careers. It was everything Natalie had needed and couldn't find, everything that might have saved her life if it had existed 6 years ago. The 5 of them walked through quiet halls. The center was closed today for the ceremony, but normally it'd be busy with counselors and clients and the steady work of helping people navigate trauma and fight for accountability. They ended up in the memorial room. Photos lined the walls, not just Natalie, but others, service members who'd been harmed by the culture that existed before, who'd suffered in silence or spoken up and been punished, whose stories had helped push reforms forward. In the center was a bronze plaque with Natalie's photo, 19 years old, smiling in her dress uniform, looking impossibly young and hopeful. Below her photo was a quote from the letter she'd left behind. "I tried to do the right thing. I hope someday the system makes it easier for others to do the same." Declan stood in front of his daughter's photo for a long time. The others gave him space, understanding grief never really leaves. It just changes shape. Becomes something you carry rather than something that carries you. Finally, he spoke. She would have been 25 now, would have finished her enlistment, maybe re-upped, maybe gone to college. I think about that sometimes. All the future she didn't get to have. She has a different kind of future, Alara said quietly. Every person who walks through these doors, every complaint that gets investigated properly, every career that doesn't get derailed by some predator who thinks he's untouchable, that's Natalie's future. That's her legacy. And ours, Barrett added. We all played a part in building this. Together, Quinn said. That's how it had to be. And how it'll continue, Cole finished. The work's never done. Declan nodded. I know. Doesn't make it easier, but it makes it mean something. They stood together in silence for a while, 5 warriors who'd fought the same fight in different ways, who'd taken a tragedy and turned it into something that might prevent other tragedies. It wasn't enough. Could never be enough. But it was something. Alara reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, the blue flash drive that Declan had given her that night at the bar 6 years ago. Natalie's voice preserved forever, speaking truth to power. I've held on to this, Alara said. Never needed to use it at trial, we had enough evidence without it. But I've kept it anyway. Felt like it should stay with someone who understood what it meant. You should keep it, Declan said. You're the one who will carry this work forward, who will make sure the next generation understands why these reforms matter. That flash drive is a reminder of what happens when systems fail, when people stay silent, when career and convenience matter more than doing what's right. Alara closed her fingers around the drive. It was warm from being in her pocket, just like the day Declan had first given it to her. Such a small object to carry so much weight, but that was often how it worked. The most important things were the smallest. A voice, a choice, a moment of courage. They walked outside together. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The base was quieter than during the ceremonies, settling into evening rhythm. Somewhere young SEALs were training. Somewhere commanders were planning operations. Somewhere the endless work of defending the nation continued as always. What's next for you, Declan asked Alara. Deployment in 3 months, Alara said. Can't tell you where, but it's what I train for, what I'm good at. You're good at more than just operations, Declan said. You're good at leadership, at changing culture, at making sure the next generation has it better than we did. I learned from the best, Alara said, and meant it. She looked at all 4 commanders. From all of you, Barrett smiled. And the work continues. That's the beauty of it. And the burden, Cole added, but a burden worth carrying. Always, Quinn agreed. Declan's smile was bittersweet. Your father would be proud of you, Alara. I know I am. We all are. They walked toward the parking lot. Declan would drive back to his house where photos of Natalie still filled walls and her bedroom remained mostly untouched, where grief lived alongside memory and the hard-won satisfaction of knowing he'd kept his promise to his daughter, that he'd made sure her death had meaning. The 3 other commanders would return to their own lives, Barrett to his consulting work, Cole to his training academy, Quinn to his university classes, each carrying forward the mission in their own way. Alara would return to her quarters where tomorrow's training schedule already waited, where the demands of command never stopped, where warriors were always being forged and tested and prepared for missions that would come. But first they stood together one last time, watching the sun set over Camp Pendleton. 5 people bound by shared loss and shared purpose. 5 warriors who'd fought a different kind of battle and emerged scarred but victorious. Thank you, Declan said finally, for everything, for being there that night, for testifying, for carrying Natalie's story forward, for being the kind of people she believed in. Thank you for trusting us, Alara replied, for giving us the chance to help, for teaching us that being warriors isn't just about combat. It's about standing up for what's right even when it's hard. They shook hands, all 5 of them. Not salutes, they were in civilian clothes now, but clasped between equals, between people who understood sacrifice and duty and the weight of promises kept. Then they parted ways. Declan and the commanders to their cars, carrying the bittersweet satisfaction of missions completed. Alara to her quarters, carrying the ongoing responsibility of ensuring those missions' effects continued. The story that had begun 6 years ago in a crowded bar had reached its ending. Garrett Wolfe was in prison. His enablers were in prison. The systems that protected them had been reformed. Justice, however delayed, had been served. But the larger story, the story of building a military culture where everyone could serve with dignity and safety, that story was still being written, would continue to be written by every person who chose courage over comfort, who spoke up when it would be easier to stay silent, who demanded accountability when it would be convenient to look away. Alara Thorne would be part of writing that story. So would Declan Vaughn in his teaching and mentoring. So would Barrett Cole and Quinn in their various roles. So would the 200 women who just completed SEAL training and the thousands more who would come after them. So would every person who walked through the doors of the Natalie Vaughn Memorial Training Center seeking help and finding it. That was how change happened. Not in dramatic moments, though those mattered, but in the steady, unglamorous work of showing up day after day, of refusing to accept things can't be better, of believing individual actions multiplied across thousands of people could shift entire cultures. The sun finished setting. Stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Camp Pendleton settled into night, and with it the promise of another day coming. Another chance to train, to serve, to push forward. Alara stood alone in the parking lot for one more moment, looking up at those stars. Her father had looked at the same sky from forward operating bases in Iraq. Natalie had looked at it from this very base, dreaming of a future she'd never see. And now Alara looked at it, carrying the weight of their legacies and the responsibility of honoring them. "We got him," she whispered to the night, to Natalie, to all the victims who'd been silenced before. "And we're going to make sure it never happens again, I promise." The wind carried her words away. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight this moment was enough. Justice had been served, changes had been made, warriors would continue to be forged. And somewhere in the stars, perhaps the people who'd been lost along the way could finally rest knowing their sacrifices had mattered, that they'd sparked something that would outlast them all. That was legacy. That was honor. That was what warriors fought for in the end. Not glory, not recognition, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing you'd made the world a little bit better, a little bit safer, a little bit more just. Alara turned and walked toward her quarters. Tomorrow's training schedule was waiting. The work was never done, but tonight, for the first time in 6 years, she felt like she could breathe a little easier. They'd won. Not perfectly, not without loss, but they'd won, and that was something worth holding on to. The stars watched as she disappeared into the building. The base grew quieter, and in the darkness the promise remained that justice, however long delayed, would always find its way home.